nice to be here, to see Ursula and Ken and everybody here in Boston. I'm only in town for 24 hours, unfortunately, but whenever I am here, I get so much done, and it's really nice to see you. This feels a little bit like a sort of TV morning show, where I'm talking here, and then we'll kind of go to you three, and we'll have an exchange. But I just wanted to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit more about what we do at UKTI and give you a little context about what's happening in the UK right now, because it feels like a very exciting time for companies to be thinking about either setting up or expanding their operations in the UK. So let me just give you 30 seconds on UKTI. We are the foreign commercial arm of the UK government, which means that we have two missions in life. We help British companies do more business over here in the US, and we help US companies, as I say, either set up or expand in the UK. We've got a very large network. We have 130 people across the US footprint in 9 different cities, so we've got a very strong team here in Boston, led by Croaky Kirsten at the back. We have teams in Atlanta, in New York, in DC, in Miami, in Houston, in Chicago, in LA, and San Fran. And in all of those areas, whereas we're geographically split, we're sectorally aligned. So we have centers of excellence in the sectors that you would expect in each of those cities. So unsurprisingly, we have a very, very strong bio, healthcare, pharma team here in Boston. We have a strong financial and professional services team, and we do our very best to be as plugged in as we can in the overall ecosystem of what's happening here in Boston. We talk a lot to VC companies and discuss the journey that the portfolio companies are going through and see where international expansion makes sense for them, and see how we at UKTI can support them on that journey. To give you a little context about how much we do, last year we in the US were responsible for supporting 423 US-based companies who were either setting up or expanding in the UK, which is a phenomenal figure because that represents just over a quarter of all the inbound investment that the UK receives from all over the world. So the US alone contributes over a quarter of our inbound investment, and a very, very strong component of that was the work that's done out of our team here in Boston. And despite the economic challenges that we've seen over the last few years, that number has remained pretty solid, pretty consistent, and we continue to work with a very high number of companies who look to the UK as an area of growth because of the UK market, but also because it is such a strong springboard into the European market. So a little bit about what's going on in the UK right now. We are here in October 2015, and as I look back at the last 5 years, it really has been quite a journey. 5 years ago, I definitely wouldn't have wanted to share what our deficit was, what our inflation was looking like, what our unemployment figure was looking like, what our growth figures were looking like. You know, we were in a pretty challenging situation, and we have had, as you know, a coalition government over the last 5 years, and now we have a Conservative majority government in place, and we've had a very clear strategy to tackle those economic fundamentals and bring the deficit down, create an environment for business to grow in, and make it an attractive environment for businesses. So whilst we were trying to address our fiscal position, we have actually done what a lot of countries haven't done, which is make sure that that attractive environment is reflected in a reduction in corporation tax rate, for example, which is now the lowest in the G20, and come up with a whole bunch of initiatives and projects that made the UK attractive for companies to set up in particular, as we were trying to rebalance the economy. So as you know, financial services was a very key component of our overall economic position over the last few years, and still is. But we wanted to make sure that we could attract a whole bunch of new industries, the new technology scene, that would help us reposition and, as I say, rebalance our economy, not just for now, but for the medium and long term. And make sure that our proposition was attractive not just in London, which is very strong, but across the UK. And I'm actually saluting to our Major General, who has to leave at the moment. But I do want to, Richard, while you're there, very, very quickly, I just want to say that defence is so important in what we do, because we talk about the sectors that have been key for us over the last few years. We have life sciences, of course, as I'm here in Boston, creative industries, financial services, advanced engineering, infrastructure, defense and security, and innovation runs through all of those sectors and is absolutely key to what you're doing over here. And we make sure that we support that innovation as much as we can. And I was having a discussion yesterday about what's going on in the UK, for example, in medtech, fintech, and cyber. Three sectors that I think are absolutely key for the future of both our economies, and three sectors where each of our countries has a real shot at turning a competitive advantage into global leadership. As I think about the UK, fintech, for example, in London, we have regulatory system, we have the innovators, and we have the capital all converging in one city. That gives us an opportunity to really transform what financial services will become over the next few years. Many of you will know about this company called TransferWise, which is changing the way we carry out foreign exchange and mobile payments. The CEO and founder of TransferWise was saying earlier last week that he predicted that 30% of all financial services transactions over the next 10 years will actually be carried out by new emerging companies in fintech. I mean, it's just an example of how this industry is going to be transformed in the years ahead. And I think any sector or subsector where data and services come together, and we see that in health, we see that in financial services, we see that in fashion and media, are sectors where the UK has a very, very strong competitive advantage, and we're very excited about what that future is going to mean. So for us, we're in the business of supporting companies as they decide to make the leap over to the UK. Sometimes companies come to us with really simple questions, which are, how do I go about setting up my entity? What type of entity do I need to set up? What do lawyers do in the UK versus lawyers in the US? That's typically a very long answer. What do I need to think about in terms of payroll and accountancy needs? And sometimes that's enough for a company to kick off and hire a couple of sales professionals and start growing in the UK market. Other times, companies will come to us and say, we really need to understand the regulatory framework of the industry in which we operate. We really need to make sure that we identify potential partnerships for an R&D project that we have in the UK. We really need to understand the differences between the proposition in London, Manchester, Birmingham, and a whole bunch of other places. So it doesn't matter if the ask is really small or the ask is really big. We do not discriminate on size. We're here to make sure that we can support companies big and small in all of the sectors that I've mentioned, and we have a very strong team of professionals here in Boston, across the country, and back home in the UK, and we have a government that is committed to making sure that the UK really is the place for companies in which to grow their business, and our doors are open to companies from all over the world. So that's our message today, that we have a strong team, that we have the commitment to support companies internationally to think of the UK as their springboard to global growth, and that we want to work with as many of you in the room as might be interested, and make sure that we continue the dialogue. So I now leave you in the very capable hands of our esteemed panel for what I'm sure will be a wonderful discussion. Thank you, and enjoy the morning.